And welcome back to another episode. I'm Levi.
I'm Jacoby.
I'm Joe.
And this is the Thought Vessel Show. Today we have a special guest with us. We're up here in the mountains doing a recording session, so if we sound a little bit different, bear with us. We have Chase, aka Manicurves, joining us today.
Hi. Thank you for kidnapping me up here.
Oh, no.
I appreciate you letting me out of the basement.
The implications.
Joke's on you, the implications make it real.
No, but mountains up here, especially this time of year, is absolutely beautiful. Definitely happy to get a chance to move, get up here. We'll just kind of jump right into it. So starting out, how did you get into magic?
So I got into magic when I was in college. It was 2015. I weirdly know the exact date. It's December 8th, 2015. And my boyfriend at the time had been playing magic for a very long time. And I wanted to have a shared interest, with him, because I was like, he's really passionate about this hobby, so I'd love to learn. And I did like some kitchen table decks with him on the dorm room floor, and it was fun. And then I had him take me to Walmart because our LGS was closed. And I had him take me to Walmart at 10 o'clock at night. And we bought booster packs, or 9 o'clock at night or whatever. And we bought booster packs, and then we went to Olive Garden, and I opened the booster packs at Olive Garden. And that was my intro to magic, was opening booster packs at Olive Garden.
It sounds like we need to have a nice little crossover with Olive Garden after the IHOP thing.
Love Olive Garden. I know people rip on it. I really like Olive Garden.
Hear me out. We go to Olive Garden, right? We get a bunch of booster packs and just dive into soup and cards.
Olive Garden. When you're here, your family, unless you play Armageddon.
I mean, they did that in the Sonic movie.
Yeah, no, seriously.
It was an ad. That movie was an ad.
I feel like a lot of those are movies coming out now are just...
Oh, no, it was worse.
It was
worse.
blatant.
Literally, they grabbed the guy's phone, and they were like, he's not cheating on me. There isn't Tinder on his phone. He does have the Olive Garden app. And he goes, yeah, because when you're there, you're family.
I appreciate the shameless plug.
Yeah, because they also did the same thing at the end of the first one, where it was the actual gift card for sorry for destroying your home. Here's an Olive Garden gift card.
They also did it for Amazon and I think Nissan. It was noticeable.
Whatever you can do to get the funding. They got to fix the eyes somehow.
Listen, get the bag. I'm pro ad, pro sponsorship. You got to get the bag somehow.
Late stage capitalism. Get that bag.
So in 2015, Magic was an official, or Commander was an official format at that time, but you say you were doing more casual kitchen table. Was Commander a part of that at all, or is it?
So it started out as kitchen table because my partner had a bunch of just random 60 card decks that he had put together, and they were very illegal. It was soul rings, 4 soul rings and
nice.
Whatever. And the deck that I first fiddled with was Mono Black Life Gain, and it was stuff like Necropolis Regent, Zathrid Necromancer, Death Cultist or whatever, stuff like that. It was just very weird, fun mono black stuff.
Jacoby is cringing.
That was my first intro to it. And his downstairs neighbor was a friend of mine, and he was in the same major as me, and he was friends with my partner at the time. And he was like, oh, are you learning to play Magic? And I said, yeah. And I'm a very introverted person, and I am very bad at socializing. And I was like, this is a great way to socialize with people. He's like, we play Magic downstairs every Thursday or whatever. And I was like, sure, I'd love to come. And they're like, okay, we play Commander. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And I went to my LGS to ask what the hell that was. And I asked the owner, I was like, what is the best Commander out there? And he told me Niv Mizzet Firemind. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to build that then. And then that's what I started out with.
Yo.
So that explains a lot about the explosive plays that you're known for.
Probably. I didn't know anything about anything. I looked at EDHREC. I was confused because I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I needed a lot of cards. I didn't understand the rules very well, but the owner of the shop, Dale, shout out Dale, was like, Niv Mizzet Firemind is the best commander. That's the answer to your question. You should build him. And I did.
I'm right there with you. I first saw EDHREC when I was first getting into Commander. Tried to build Rith the Awakener.
It's just numbers floating everywhere, and you're like, what is this?
Yeah. About the time, this would precede the 4-color commander. So Atraxa wasn't out, Tim Thrasios wasn't out, so that probably tracks.
Very good that you say that, because the Atraxa Precon was the first Precon I ever purchased. Because my the LGS that I went to, my favorite LGS didn't have any pre-orders available; they had sold out, and there was a second LGS that we're still taking pre-orders. And so my little college friend group for Magic, we all were like, okay, we're all gonna pre-order one case, and then you pick the deck you want. And I was like, I want the Atraxa one, and that was my first ever Precon, and I picked a very good one for my first ever Precon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because the next time that they printed that was from the Vault Commander decks.
Or the Commander Anthology.
Yeah, the Commander Anthology. That's what they called the from the Vault Commander decks.
I was surprised.
And it was really good. It still holds up in some capacity today, which is really impressive because a lot of those early precons we have 3 different themes we're going off of, and you can kind of build off of one of them and scrap the rest. So they were really convoluted, like, I drew this card. This has no synergy with anything else I'm doing.
So I've got a question for you now. So now that we've kind of discovered your origins, how has your flavors, like your tastes in Magic, evolved?
It's been weird because I used to think I had a set kind of color I vibed with, you know? When I first started playing, you know, my boyfriend was trying to explain to me like what the colors did, and I didn't even really listen. I was just like black because I love black as a color. I don't play black anymore, if ever. I don't tend to touch that color. I don't really do reanimation stuff. It's all over the place. It kind of keeps changing and evolving because I like commanders in terms of playstyle, like commanders that aren't very linear. I need to like find ways to make it work. That's why I don't really like typal stuff, because typal is just like you sneeze and you kind of get value out of it. And so some of the commanders I have now, like the Locust God is the direct descendant from my Niv Firemind deck, because I like that you can wheel and you can get Locust, and like, yeah, you can get a certain amount, but like, you know, how can you get that to a umpteenth level where you can take out 4 people, which I think was really powerful and really cool. Or like Alabu, it's like, okay, you have a way to stack your deck. How are you going to do that? And also, how are you going to be able to kill people while maintaining your board state? I felt like was a really fun way to do it. It's just kind of changed. I don't really have a particular set color vibe or like play style. I just like difficult things, or like things that make you have to like work a little bit harder.
Well, I mean, I think I would argue at this point, you know, from what I'm, you know, hearing, is that your knowledge of the game has allowed you to play things that allow you to use your instincts more than just being kind of set and confined into a particular strategy. So you like commanders that allow you that variability in the game to kind of adjust on the fly.
Yeah, there's a really good example of that is like, I have a Boros deck, it's Kadric Soul Kindler, and that was from the Dihada Precon, that Mardu Precon, which was very legendary themed, like lots of legendary creatures and stuff. And when I played that Precon, I noticed that Kadric did not say legendary creature, it said legendary permanent. And so I feel like a lot of people are going to go, okay, well, when a legendary permanent enters the battlefield, you pay 1. If you do, you get a token copy of it that gains haste, and then you sacrifice it at the next end step. Most people I feel like would go, okay, well, I can get all these really cool legendary creatures that have haste and that can swing. And I was like, that is too easy. I want to make it harder. And so I went with Super Friends. I did Planeswalkers because I was like, that's kind of nifty and a little bit harder, and you can't swing with them, so the haste doesn't matter. But like, I was like, something that like is a different, that requires you to think a little bit more on the fly, because Planeswalkers are so specific that you have to kind of be precise with how you play them.
That actually sounds really rad.
That does sound really fun.
I am curious. You said it's Boros?
Yes.
Did you slap some Giddy boys in there?
There is exactly 1 Gideon in there.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, the boy. Dude, please tell me the Black Blade. Put it in his hands.
It's the one, I don't remember the name of it. It's the one that gives you an emblem that says, if you control a Gideon Planeswalker, you can't like lose the game.
Okay, so the copy makes the emblem, and then you try to keep the other one around. Is that the?
So sometimes what I like to do with that is kind of like my Hail Mary in there. I used to have a couple, like 2 other Gideons in there, but it just didn't really fit the vibe of what it was going for. So I kept that Gideon there as my like panic button. I'll have him enter, I'll get a copy, I'll use the copy to get the emblem, and then with the other one, I'll just like uptick him and like kind of try. Sometimes I can keep both of them around if I have stuff like the Sundial of the Infinite or whatever that lets me keep my stuff, because I can immediately end the turn. So sometimes I'll be able to keep my 2 Gideons and kind of have people go, okay, I have 2 Gideons to deal with, so I can like 1, 2 and try and focus on that.
My particular one is, did you have the Sarkon that turned all the planeswalkers into dragons?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
That is a win con in there just in case, which I really appreciate, which makes it really fun because some of those planeswalker tokens that come in, if I have enough mana and I sequence everything right, they have haste. Play Sarkon, they turn into creatures, they have haste, and swing with those, which I really appreciate.
Nothing says square up like turning all your boys into boys and swinging hands.
Yep.
So putting you on the spot a little bit, looking back, we probably met in Virginia at one of the Star City cons. At the time, because we're recording this approaching December, so we're at the end of 2023. One of your New Year's resolutions that we were discussing at the time was you're wanting to play more green, and you're forcing yourself to play more of that color. So I'm curious on, now that we're at the back end of the year, like how has that gone? Like, have you learned anything from it, or what's that experience been like?
I forced myself to play green. I did actually do that. I built a green deck. I still have it. Every time I think about taking it apart, I play it and I'm like, okay, like I'll keep it. The reason why I enjoy it so much is because I've distilled it down to its greenness, if that makes any sense. Like there's no shenanigans, there's no tricks. It is a straight, easy mono green creatures combat deck. And that's what it is. It's just you play stuff, you play big stuff, you swing big, and that's how you win. And I think that made me like it more because I felt like there was a lot of commanders in mono green that just didn't really do a lot of things that I wanted to do. Stuff like landfall stuff or like land strategies, or like there's a lot of like good Titania decks and stuff like that, but that just wasn't really vibing. And I liked the commander that I chose was Zapandrel because it doubles power and toughness each combat. And so I thought it was really fun that I could play the big ridiculous things and make them even bigger and play things that I never would normally play. Like there's this Hydra that's like 8 green pips, which is a ridiculous card to play in Commander, but it gets reduced by a green pip if you have a certain amount of green creatures. I was like, I'd never be able to play this if I was not playing this deck, so I'm going to run it.
Oh,
and it's made
absolutely.
me like it more.
And I've definitely been murdered by that deck before, so
It's fun.
it can definitely hit, especially when you get additional power doublers and then everything's coming at you for like 40. So definitely good. Looking back, as far as obviously you had a significant other at the time that got you into the game. Looking back towards your childhood, like what kind of stuff were you into kind of growing up?
I was a big Pokemon kid.
Sure.
I was a big Pokemon kid. I had a lot of toys. I had the cards, didn't play the card game. I just got the cards because I liked the art. I was like 5, like baby, like knew nothing. I collected Pokemon cards and like Pokemon toys and Pokemon games. I collected Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I did not play the game. I just collected them because I liked the show. And I played like a lot of video games growing up.
I feel like everyone in our generation watched Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yep.
Like it was out there.
Rocked.
All right, I gotta know. Did you hate on Digimon, or were you just passive to it?
I never knew what Digimon was until I was an adult. And when I say adult, I want to say like late teens, where it just was outside of my scope of perception. Looking back now, I like look at Digimon and I'm like, this is just like a very blatant ripoff of Pokemon, and I don't like it. I look at it and I'm like,
But the funny thing is, Digimon actually came first.
I know, but Pokemon is so much better. And they did so much better.
You had my heart, and then you ripped it right out.
I'm
Don't have to be first, you
sorry.
just have to win.
Yeah, you don't have to be first. You just have to be good at what you do. And Pokemon went, okay.
But Revolver Dragon.
I stand by it.
I feel very strongly about it, and I've never really watched Digimon or whatever. I've just like seen clips of it, and I've seen clips of like games and like even the card game, and I'm like,
I can understand that. I grew up with Digimon, so I'm of the adverse. That's just where I'm standing at.
And I kind of wanted to, because you've mentioned this in the past before, and you kind of brought it up on the show today as well. So you talked about, being introverted, and you're in, this field right now of content creation where you have a lot of eyes on you, whether it's on streams or going to conventions. Like, what has that been like? I'm sure that's got to be draining on your social battery.
horrible. It's very weird because I don't like to be perceived like ever. And that's from a whole lot of really cool therapy stuff from like my childhood. What crazy. But I like being able to stream. I think it's fun. I like being able to connect with people that have a shared interest. That's why I like Magic so much. And I feel more comfortable doing it via stream because like I'm in a controlled setting. I feel comfortable. I'm talking with people, but I'm not really seeing them. And I really like that. And I feel like I can be more personable doing that. When I get to a MagicCon or an in-person setting, it is a lot. lot. And it's gotten better over the years, but like when I first started, like Baby Chase just started making content of doing like the bare minimum. I went to a Star City event and I was like, I'm gonna be here. It was like a 2-day event. I was like, I'm gonna be here both days. I lasted 1 day and then I called my boyfriend at the time and I was like, can you come pick me up? I can't do this. And that happened twice. I couldn't do it twice, and I've slowly built up a bit of a better, I guess, tolerance for it. And even now, I still get overwhelmed. But
I think your social battery a little bit, because I'm introverted as well, but I work in finance, so I have to be able to talk to a lot of people and be a bit more charismatic and understanding kind of match levels. So I think I kind of looked at it as more like a muscle, like you can kind of build it up a little bit, but you can also tear muscles. So it can definitely kind of snap back a little bit. Joe, however, is our social butterfly. Like we can send him into New York City and he'll befriend everybody. We put him on a plane. He'll take a picture with the pilot in the cockpit.
Correct.
All the time.
Because I have no problem reaching out and just saying, hey, do you want to play a game? Stuff like that. Even though I may have my own introverted moments.
You and I, my dear, are birds of a feather. You and I have almost pitch perfect exactness in our opinions. I don't like being perceived either. Cons are extremely draining, and the only reason I can get through them is I got my boys here with me, and they kind of manage me to make sure I do stuff because I will get lost.
I need
and
handlers.
nervous.
I need handlers.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why, in fact, I am your token extrovert. I go there with you. I make sure you're having fun.
The running gag of always like an extrovert will find an introvert to adopt as they go along. Like that's very true.
It keeps happening.
We're a weird triangle of like handlers because Levi has to handle the both of us because if he leaves us to our own devices, we get lost.
Well, it's more or less keeping y'all at the task at hand.
Well, yeah, especially when he was in line for autographs one time at one of those SEG cons.
Oh, yeah.
He just sent both of us to go see how much the tokens were. Something that should have taken a minute because we went over, should have come back, tell him how much it was. We then started an entire conversation with the person at the booth, got a whole bunch of details of their life, a whole bunch of the stuff that they've been doing, went back, and then I only got the question,
Yeah.
so how much was it? And I didn't have an answer.
And to clarify this as well, like I was in line for Rob Alexander because I was wanting to get some cards signed and buy some prints. It was Andrea Radek was the artist. I really appreciate a lot of their work, and they made an owl in Magic, so I definitely had to get that signed. They were having a deal for the tokens. I sent them over there. They were gone for 20 minutes, which should have taken all of like 30 seconds. And only one of them came back.
It was good conversation.
I got distracted by the bunnies.
Every time. Every time. This is what I deal with all the time. But with that said, so introvert, you do like it a lot, but how did someone who's more introvert in nature decide they wanted to get into content creation?
It happened by accident, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
I was in grad school and I was just tweeting a lot about Magic because I really liked it. And I just started tweeting about it more and more. I started following more and more content creators and like notable figures. And I was like, this is really cool. I really like this. Ended up in some like hate videos by proxy or whatever, And I was like seeing all these cool people do all these cool things because it was like the golden era of like SCG competitive stuff. And I was like, this is really cool. So I just started tweeting more, and then I wanted to stream, but I didn't have the money, so I borrowed some stuff from my friends, and I just kind of started doing it because I was bored and in grad school, and I was like, I don't have time to go to an LGS, so I'll just do it from home.
Any kind of outlet, sure. I'm sure grad school was very stressful. And then from there, so you were streaming. I'm assuming around that time frame that was more MTGO or
no. So I was streaming Paper Commander, but I was doing it through at the time Discord.
Okay.
Because before there was a Discord update, there was something with the way the video camera worked because my friend Logan set it up for me because he was very tech savvy. Because originally I was doing Arena and I hated it. And then he was like, just stream Commander. I'm like, no one's going to want to watch that. And he was like, just do it. And so he showed me how and he set it up and I did it through Discord before Spell Table was even a thing. And there was like 2 other people doing Commander gameplay streams and I think they were doing it through Discord as well. spell. I don't even know. But then Spell Table came and I was like, thank God, because it's just an easier way to do it.
It has been quite a godsend.
So, and with that as well, so you were in grad school, and as I recall, it was for social work?
Yes.
All right. So what made you pick social work?
I picked social work because I had a bachelor's in psychology and I wanted to be a therapist, but I did not want to take forever. I'm good at school. I don't like school. And so I asked my advisor at the time, what's the fastest way for me to start seeing clients? And she said, the fastest way is to get a social work degree. She says, you do everything a therapist does, and you learn a lot about social issues that are correlated with mental health. And I really liked that because it was less clinical and it was more person focused. And so then I was like, cool, I'm doing it. I didn't really question it. I was like, okay, that's the degree I'm going to get, I guess.
Full send.
Literally, I was like, cool, let's do it. 2 years of school versus 6, heartbeat, let's go.
Makes sense to me. Yeah, absolutely. So, with the social work background, definitely, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So, and for those who don't know, Chase is a writer for Star City Games and a couple other websites as well, and also does the editing for EDH Recast. And then on top of the streaming and everything else that you're doing, it seems like you're wearing 1,000 different hats.
I feel like I am. I'm tired all the time.
Absolutely. So how does someone from the social work world end up on the video editing or writing side? Where was that connection?
Yeah. So what happened was I graduated at the very beginning of the pandemic. I want to say 'cause I think I graduated March, maybe. I don't know how time works. I just remember it was an M month. So I think March. And I graduated then right as the pandemic started, and you could tell things were getting serious because they had pulled us out of our internship placements and out of our physical classes, and we were doing everything over Zoom. It was beginning of all that. And we graduated, and finding a job was impossible as a social worker, as a therapist, as a mental health professional, because COVID was just starting. You can't because when you do therapy, you can't just do it out in the open. You have to do it in a room that's closed. You have to be with the person, and there was a whole 6 feet apart thing. It was just the start of the pandemic. Everyone was really scared, really freaking out, and it was impossible. I applied for dozens of jobs, and I think I only got 2 interviews out of the dozens I applied for. And I was just working at Starbucks at the time, which was my job that I had in grad school, and I was exhausted and I was stressed, and I was I'm never gonna find a job. I had guested on the EDH Recast stream a couple times, and I had befriended Matt, Joey, and Dana, and I love them to death. They were you're in content and stuff, are you interested in video editing? And I was honestly, yeah, because I don't know how to do it. And I would like to learn how to do it, because that way I can be better, at the craft that I'm doing. And, they were there's this position, you should apply for it. And I'm well, I don't know how to do it. And they're you can learn. And I was okay. And I applied for it, and I interviewed, and I got it. And then
there you go.
Literally, that's how it started.
So where did what happened with the training?
The training was in LA, and we did that with the lovely folks at the Command Zone, because Command Zone, for a while, if you go back to some of the older episodes, the Command Zone did the editing for the EDH Recast, and they did a beautiful, phenomenal job. And they were doing the editing there. It was a lot of work. They wanted to take on another person, and so I was okay, because EDH was we want another person to take on. They're okay. Then Command Zone was we're going to train you on how to edit the way we edit. And so then we just did a training thing with them in LA, and it was phenomenal. It made me realize I don't like Los Angeles. But the people there were phenomenal. Everything was really amazing, and I learned literally from the best people you could learn from.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. They flew you out there, and this was pandemic time still, or
it was 2 years ago in February. By this upcoming February, it will be 2 years ago.
Okay, so we're still masked up on the plane and everything like that too. So that's wild. They're let's fly you out to LA.
I believe that is double the second booster was out about that time.
It wasn't mid-pandemic where it wasn't safe to travel or anything. It was very much you have to get tested, you have to have the COVID vaccine and the boosters, you had your card and everything. COVID test beforehand. Like health and safety was like of the utmost.
Yeah.
And so like I had to provide like my card and stuff. And, you know, I even got COVID tested, I think twice before I went.
Right. You had to go the whole 9 yards to get everything done.
Yeah, because it's just, you know, all that stuff.
All right. And so with your experience as well, I mean, obviously, I'm sure it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows trying to go from the tweeting to, you know, live streaming, video editing, things of that nature. Like what kind of pitfalls have you had in your career, whether it's comments or just technical snags, like anything?
I feel like a lot of people would think it would be comments, and like when I first started out, there were some negative comments, and even now there's some negative comments. Usually that doesn't bother me. There was a hot minute where it did, but I genuinely think like the biggest pitfall that I still struggle with, but was detrimental to the point where I would have probably stopped had I not kind of reevaluated, was like self-comparison. I did that to a point where it was so unhealthy, and my poor friends were like, you need to see a therapist because we can't help you with this. Like I had talked to them so much about this that I had genuinely like put them in a spot where they were like, I can't do this for you anymore. And it was really bad. And I'm still friends with them, thank God, you know, but like it was really horrible where I would just like beat myself down like mentally. And, you know, I would just say all these horrible things about myself. I would compare myself to other people, other content groups, other whatevers. It did not matter what they were doing. It wasn't even like, oh, what they're doing, I deserve. It was, they're doing this. I am garbage. I'm horrible. I will never get there because I'm garbage and horrible. I'm a fraud and everything is bad and I should feel bad because I'm bad. It was kind of like that.
Gotcha. You know, without, obviously we don't want to dive into anything super personal. But did you was there any like major breakthroughs with that?
Not a dang clue. I don't know. I just remember it was really awful and then it got a little better.
Well, that's good.
I still do it, but like where it was 2020, horrible.
Like imposter syndrome comes for us all, and one of the more prominent things that I actually saw on TikTok, and it was a story from Neil Gaiman, and about how he went to this whole party, and that Neil Gaiman was like, "Man, I'm so shocked to be here with all these famous people. They seem more famous than I am." And then bonds over a guy also named Neil, and how that same person was feeling the same emotions. Turns out Neil Gaiman was talking to Neil Armstrong. The guy who walked on the moon. And hey, if someone who can walk on the moon and be an astronaut can get imposter syndrome, be sure that you can too.
Yeah.
So I do have another additional question. As a content creator who makes all these different types of content, because you do streams, what is your opinion on things like VTubers who do streams for various other contents? I guess the perspective version.
Oh, I think it's dope. I love it. I think it's really great because going back to the whole thing, like I don't like to be perceived. And there are some people who are probably even more terrified of being perceived, but they still want to do something that they're passionate about or share their love or excitement or enjoyment of that. Or maybe it's not even that. Maybe they just think it's really cool to look like an octopus on screen or whatever. I think it's phenomenal because it's a level of accessibility that I think is good for streaming. I think it's unique. I think it's cool. There's like a handful of magic VTubers that I see like on the magic little screen. I think it's amazing. I love it.
VTubing has always just been very interesting. I'm actually friends with some VTubers, and a lot of it is not even just not being perceived. Some of it is just in a more enjoyable for the audience if they are taking on that persona.
Yeah.
Because some of them are like, at least the friends that I have been have chronic diseases, so they're not always going to be in the best looking shape, and a VTuber is always going to look how you need it to look.
And I think, you know, that's one kind of like, we have, you know, people like Zuckerberg, like wearing the same thing every day, like just one less thing you have to worry about so you can just focus on the content. I think there's a lot of positives to it. I think it's great.
For sure. There's also like that comfort of like that level of like anonymity too that I really like. When I stream, I feel comfortable talking to chat because they're usernames and they're not real people.
Sure.
I feel comfortable doing that. And in person, I'm a little bit more stressed out, but someone even might be feeling uncomfortable doing that with their regular face or whatever. It could be just because they're just anxious. And so like having that level of separation, I think brings a level of confidence. Like I get a level of confidence when I stream because there's that separation for me. So,
you know, one thing I definitely wanted to talk about, because we had talked about it, I didn't have a chance to see it. And then eventually when I went to MTG Con Vegas, you had you were on a panel as far as mental health and content creation in Magic, and it was a really good panel. I'm just kind of curious on how this came to be, and where you decided to divide everything up. It was really informative, and I think everyone there had a fantastic experience with it. I'm just kind of curious on how everything went.
Yeah, so that was spearheaded by Hobbs Q on Twitter. He is the host of the Goblin Lore podcast, and they kind of relate like lore and like flavor into like real world themes. Often it's mental health related. And Hobbs, like me, has a similar background in mental health, except that is what he currently does. That is like his main job. And so he likes to find ways to correlate that into Magic. And so originally, and I think it was Minneapolis, he proposed that panel idea. And he was like, do you want to do it? Because I had befriended Hobbs years ago, and we both bonded over Magic and mental health. And, he calls me like an unofficial host, which I appreciate. But we talk about Magic and mental health, and Hobbs is like, I know that you have a background in this. You love this. I love this. Do you want to do a panel? I was like, sure. And I was like, it's not going to get accepted. And I got accepted in Minneapolis, and it went well. And then he asked for it in Vegas, and he was like, let's do it again. I'm like, well, we did it once. They're not going to want to repeat. And then they were like, yeah, do the panel. So it's really all Hobbs's idea, and Hobbs has a way of finding, I think, very amazing guests and very amazing people to speak about these topics that provide different perspectives. Like in Minneapolis, we had an amazing group, and in Vegas, we had an amazing group too.
Wasn't one of the guests for that one in Vegas Shivam?
Yes, Shivam was there in Vegas. It was me, Shivam, Ryan, and Hobbs in Vegas.
This was coming off of Tron is Bad's, like it was 1,000th day of sobriety.
Yes, that was, I think his 1,000th day of sobriety was like a couple days after, and so it was like a really great way for him to like celebrate that. I think
it was awesome being able to hear kind of his experiences with everything and kind of how things had gone.
Yeah, especially since he's such a wholesome guy.
And then that's as far as we had for kind of the general interviews. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
And with this as well, on this show there are some different segments that we enjoy doing. If you'd like to jump in with us, the first one, of course, is Am I the Arch Enemy, where we look at a particular situation, evolving of Commander or Magic, and kind of weigh in on, is that person the arch enemy?
So let me just hop right into this. Am I the Arch Enemy Commander Edition? I like to run commanders that shut off a fundamental aspect of the game. I find they disrupt common play patterns and give me an advantage. Generally, this includes turning off death triggers, continuously exiling graveyards, or limiting spells per turn. Some players at my local store prefer to discuss what commanders are coming to the table and often change decks after hearing about the matchup. I refuse to reveal my commander until the start of the game, as that is what the rules dictate. They claim that swapping out a deck that's a rough matchup makes the game more fun. I feel it is counterpicking, and doing so unfairly targets me as a disruption player. It's not like I see a particular commander and swap my deck out to one that specifically harms them. Am I the arch enemy for keeping my commander secret until the game starts?
So that's an interesting way to look at it. I'm gonna hold off here on my comments for a second. Joe, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The counterpicking can certainly happen at a lot of game stores, because you're always going to have those ones that are trying to be a little bit more spiky, even in casual play of, well, they're going to pick that deck, so I'm going to pick this deck, and it's going to be at least fine during this kind of matchup, and blah, 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 blah. But then there's also just the mystery of what people are bringing is sometimes just all the better.
I have many interesting feelings about this. You saw me make faces during the email, because in the beginning I was like, you've lost me. And then you start saying more, and I'm like, no, actually, you have me. And then you said one more thing, and I'm like, okay, you've lost me again. And it was because like there was a lot of back and forth in that email, because you were like shutting off fundamental aspects, and I'm like, okay, that means like no, you can't cast your commander, but that wasn't listed in there. And I was like, okay, well, graveyard stuff and one spell per turn, I don't think that's bad. You have me back in there. But then like being like, well, I it's against like the fundamental thing of like letting me be a disruption player, but like at the same time, like commander is quite literally all about openness, and like it's the enjoyment of the pod is valued more than the enjoyment of the individual, is kind of like the mantra of commander, so to speak. And so like in my head I was like, oh, because like hiding your commander because you're playing something that can make things disruptive for somebody, I think is where I get lost. Because like, for instance, my friend had a Nekusar deck and I had a Locust God deck, and I didn't reveal I had a Locust God deck until I could play it, because I thought it was hysterical because it was a race against the clock between us because our decks were so synergistic. And like, that's where I think it's funny to hide your commander.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
Yeah, I think the aspect of just being the stacks player. They say disruptive. It's definitely a stacks, because if you're taking away certain elements of the game, making sure that people only cast one spell a turn, doing stuff like that, certainly can understand why some people may not want to do that. And I think there might also just be a conversation to be had of just not wanting you to play those kinds of decks.
well, like, even then, and I'm talking so much, but like, even then, like, if you come up to me and you're like, I'm a stacks player, I have this commander, this is what it does. If you tell me what it does and I'm okay with it, cool. And if you tell me what it does and I'm like, okay, well, like, my mono white flyers deck is probably not the choice because it is a theme deck that's more cutesy. It's synergistic, but it's cutesy. I'll probably switch to a more powerful deck like Alibu or Locust God because they are more powerful, can handle that. I think that's a perfectly fair thing to do, because in Commander, your commander is quite literally face up for everybody to see. That's like, my commander is this. Like, everyone knows what your commander is.
There's a part of this, or I'm kind of looking here. This guy or gentleman, kind lady, whatever they are, were lovely individual, thank you, kind of sitting here very, rules are rules kind of in their wordature here. They're kind of like, the rule dictates that I don't reveal until we start, so therefore the rules supersede your fun. Kind of the vibe I was getting from their usage here.
I've been like, I get like salty in games all the time. I got salty during a game last night because I thought there was like a game changing aspect that was skipped 2 turns. Turns out it wasn't. But like, I can understand getting a little bit frustrated because like, of course, like, that's, we all get salty. To say we aren't is to say that I wouldn't believe you if you said that you never got salty. Yeah. But like, Commander is the least rules focused format known to Magic. And I would argue like, you can say, like, if you were to come up to me and you're like, I want to keep my commander hidden, I would at least like you to tell me the theme of the deck, because that way I'm not going to go, okay, well, you cast a Janeth Magistrate, I can't play the game, I'm going to scoop because I feel like I've been lied to and I feel like I can't trust you now. And that would make me not want to play with you anymore. If I just walked up to you randomly at an LGS, I wouldn't want to do that.
I had a similar experience when I would be playing my 1 creature Prismatic Bridge to get the Brash Taunter out. And I actually had a conversation with Rachel Weeks in Philadelphia, because I would just be like, oh, I don't want to tell you what the creature is. And she told me pretty much straight out, then people can have a warped perception of what you're doing with the deck if you're not telling people what that 1 creature is.
Yeah.
Because it could be as low as, I'm trying to get out this very, very meme creature, to I put a Hullbreaker Horror as the 1 creature.
Everyone listening, that it's Brash Taunter, which is just a stuffy doll on steroids. But with that being said, a couple things come to mind as well, because from his perspective, he doesn't want to telegraph entirely what his deck strategy is. And I've started playing Pauper recently because I wanted to get into a 60 card format. And I was, I had a couple of, friends show up at the shop. I was just kind of showing him some of the decks. One of the players is somewhat new to Commander, like more of a casual player. And she said something very interesting. She's like, well, I don't see the Commander, so I have no hints as far as what the deck's doing. So it's harder to figure it out. And I think a lot of that too, where, being able to see what the Commander is, with some exceptions, mind you, it kind of helps players diagnose how much of a threat they're going to be. So I think some transparency in that regard, but I also understand if you have something that's very obviously going to be in one particular direction, not necessarily wanting to reveal in the sense that someone's going to take advantage of that information, like, oh, well, you're going to play a Vulture on Commander, I want to make sure you're sacrificing all your creatures all the time, so I'm going to swap out. So it's kind of a weird middle ground, but this is effectively someone who's a stacks player that has an issue with Rule 0.
On that same note, the fact that they're mentioning, getting counterpicked. It sounds something similar to, I'm going to bring this Walker Walker's deck, and then someone just brings like bajillion tokens deck to spite you.
When it comes to situations like that, particularly, it from the way that things are worded, and you have to understand, like, this is me coming from a perspective of not knowing this individual and only knowing them based on the very limited information in an email. It sounds like winning is placed at the very top of the experience, and like it's fun to win, but like Commander isn't really about that. Winning is fun. All of us like to win. None of us really love losing, but like you can have fun losing. But like, you know, specifically saying like revealing my strategy, that is something I think more about in 60 card competitive formats where like that is quite literally you have no information known until your person plays that land, and then you go, okay, they're playing this color, so they must be in this meta or whatever. That's not something you get in Commander. And also with that, like in terms of being like counterpicked, I have never really had that experience before. And if that is an experience they're having where if they're playing, let's say they're playing like, how do I explain it? Let's say that for some reason they're like, I'm playing an artifact deck, and then they reveal that information and their opponent takes out a deck that's like, this is an artifact removal deck. I wouldn't want to play with that person anymore. You might need a new play group, my guy.
Yeah.
We have at our particular game store, this exact interaction you just described happened. We have a friend named Eric who has an all artifacts deck. The deck is 63 artifacts, every artifact land he can in 3 colors. And knowing this information, another player pulled out Kibo, the artifact destroying ape, knowing that he was playing this deck.
And I remember playing that same deck when I had my artifact deck, and I even talked to him and said that might not have been the best deck to play to have everyone have enjoyment.
And as far as that's concerned, as well, is like there was a deck that I actually ended up taking apart for this reason, because like when I was first starting Commander, I didn't know that was a problem. Where I built because I was a big fan of like, you know, independent wrestling and stuff, and in New World Japan there was, you know, a faction called the Bullet Club. The whole idea was basically that the leader will always change, but the Bullet Club lasts forever. So it was a very generic mono black deck with about 9 different eligible commanders, and I could see what my opponents are playing and find which of the 9 would be best suited and put it into the command zone.
Oh, yeah.
So, and none of them were like particularly any good, but then, you know, more people were like, we don't really like what to do that. I was like, okay. So I just ended up taking it apart. And then I think I just built like a quick life gain or something out of the remains of it. Newer players going in may not understand that to have that discussion, but I think it's harder to get a feel because I think both parties are a little bit wrong in this situation, because if you're fearing someone doing that to you, that's not good. But you know, I think you can have like a rule 0 discussion without fully saying this is my commander. Like I can say like I have a Aura Matters Voltron type commander.
I would actually argue the opposite. I would prefer to know what the commander is and you not tell me the theme, because there are ways to do that. Like I would rather you know, be open and honest, because again, like that's like what Commander is about. But like if you are like very desperate to have like that strategy or anonymity, I would rather see the commander, because the commander doesn't always indicate how your deck is going to go. Example, my Cadric deck, people would assume creatures, it's Super Friends. Example, Dana Roach, lovely individual, he has an Ognis deck, which is Jund colors, it's mono red. No one would expect that when you see a Jund commander, it's mono red. You know, so like you can still have a commander and you can kind of, that cannot tell you the full picture of what is happening. If you wanted to really grip onto your strategy, that's my vibe.
And that just goes into the phrase, my commander's Atraxa, but it's not that Atraxa.
You could do Atraxa energy.
Right.
I wouldn't know.
I mess with that belief. I like the idea of you can know the commander, but don't really disclose your theme, because I've built some really wacky decks that are, you look at it and you go, oh, it's very clearly this. It starts to do that and then fails to do anything similar.
As a very quick aside, I'm very glad that they're bringing energy back for Fallout.
I'm very excited about that too.
That is true. We were definitely needing it, and I don't know with all the standards that's where that would have necessarily lied. So I'm pretty excited about that.
But yeah, I think that this is a very clear-cut case of that guy probably needs to lay off the stacks all that much, but the other people need to not counterpick.
I also think like in that thing, it says like they could counterpick, but like, you know, the person in the email said that they will change their decks to play something better suited. Yeah. I think that's normal practice for any commander pod. You know, if you brought out your clone deck and I'm like last night, you brought out your clone deck. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to bring out my mono white flyers. It's not going to hold a candle. Yeah. So I have to swap.
Well, and I've brought out a deck sometime and then I'll see someone like pull out a precon. I'm like, oh, whoops.
Yep. I do that too.
Yeah.
There was perfect example of when we did this too. The two-headed giant we had, where we had our two options. We went with our lighter stuff rather than our CDH stuff because we walked up the table. Kid pulled out like, oh, this is just my cool deck, and we went had all our decks out, and we're like, okay, not this one.
So, but I think it's a little bit easier to scale up than to accelerate.
My parting advice with this would be if you're so wanting to have that strategy, maybe find a play group that fits that best. There are play groups that can do, it doesn't even have to be high power play groups, but there are play groups who are like, yeah, I like the anonymity of it. Or there are high powered play groups who are like, you run stacks, I love that. But like in that situation, if that happened to me, I would feel like I was lied to and I would genuinely probably scoop.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Moving on to our draft today. So our draft topic, we're going to be doing 4 rounds. It's a snake draft. So Chase, since you're our guest, you're going to be starting us off. And then the order here will be going, it'll be Joe, Jacoby, then I'll be going 4th. Then I take 5th, Jacoby, Joe, back to you, back and forth until we're through 4 rounds. And it's just going to be overrated cards. So any card you think is just perceived at a higher power than it actually should be. Chase, you are on the clock.
Okay, my first pick is going to be dual lands.
That was on my list. That's a good one.
Spicy.
Why would you say dual lands?
They're overpriced for what they are, and in Commander you can have just like the battle bond lands and they're the same thing basically. I mean, they're not fetchable, but like, I mean, come on, like you're fine.
That's the whole reason why they are prominent in CDH is because they are fetchable.
Yep.
All right, fantastic. So the dual land cycle. So with the first pick, Chase has selected 10 cards. We will go from there.
Cheat the system.
Joe.
So I'm going to go with one of my favorite cards, Sensei's Divining Top.
Okay.
I honestly, and unless you were doing combo, it is not that strong. You still have to pay mana to look at just the top 3. And then if the choice that you need is not in those top 3, drawing doesn't do anything.
That's fair. Can't scry.
The fact that it is as highly rated as it is, I understand. It's a very good card. You can combo with it with, what's her name? Elsha the Infinite. You can combo with Elsha with it. Outside of that, it's an okay card.
Well, I mean, there's some Yuriko lists and stuff that you can put something more dangerous on the top of your library and things like that. But that's still a bit more corner case.
It's not as good as it used to be.
I'd rather have a scroll rack than a Sensei's top.
I could see that. All right, Jacoby, you're up.
All right, hot take here. Brace yourselves for impact. We're going with every Teferi. Every Teferi.
I like that.
Yo.
Every single Teferi.
Why?
Okay, so hear me out, right? Cool, just like the top. Combo parts, right? Without those parts, really? You gonna just, I untap some things. I stop some dudes. Blah, blah, blah. I'm Teferi. I unravel time. Really not that great, in my opinion. I have a vendetta against him as a human being because I hate chronomancy. But without all of the other components to make him great, he is just not quite there.
I think there's a lot of valuable cards in Teferi, and being able to untap is kind of a blue way to ramp if you're not in green. But hey, it's your pick. It's all right to be wrong.
I mean, just the fact that 3 fairy exists.
I like that. I like that one.
Yeah, three fairies is pretty great. But that's 3 fairies are a league of its own. By saying all Teferis, you definitely put yourself in a corner there.
No. It's bad.
It's okay.
Get out of here.
If that's the hill you want to die in. So for mine, of course, we're looking in the context of casual commander. So I'm not taking into factor CDH. Mine is going to be cards like Chromox. So the mana acceleration cards that are putting you at a disadvantage with your hand. Chromox specifically because you are actually having to sacrifice a valid card in a game that you are already, statistically speaking, at card disadvantage at any given time.
Hard take.
I mess with that take.
I kind of agree and yet I don't agree because I have a Chromox in my Secret Lair Sisay deck and it's really good when I get a Chromox in my opening hand, and I also have the 7 mana Grixis Nicol Bolas, and I'm like, can't play this for a while, so I can get a Grixis Mana Rock turn 1. Feels pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is definitely some validity. It is a good card. It's just that if I am in a format that is requiring me to remove a card from my hand that we're playing for the long haul, I would prefer to have something that maybe doesn't tap for the color, but is is going to at least not have to be sacrificed an additional card from a hand to use.
Yeah, you don't see Chromox too often, so I kind of agree. I'm just the exception, I think.
Can't relate.
No stress. I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
I have a pretty foil one, and it's signed, so I have to run it.
There you go.
Hey, I don't blame you. I mean, it is a good card, but I think that it is a little overrated for the casual format. It is back to me. So wrapping up round one here, we had all the dual lands, Sensei's Binding Tops, all to fairies, and then Chromox. Now, the second one I'm going to look at is a card that is really effective if you have the ability to play it and then something else, but in and of itself does not give enough on its own for me to justify it being considered like the Omega threat. And it also usually brings a lot of heat to that player that it's cast, and that's Doubling Season. Understandably so. Doubling Season in a Super Friends deck or with a lot of token enabling strategies, it is a great card, but it's a 5 mana do nothing card. If you're in a turn in which you can cast 5 mana and something else, great. But most of the time you're usually in a situation I'm going to have to play Doubling Season, pass, hope no one has any artifact or enchantment removal cut type of spells, and then get back to my turn and try to take advantage. And most of the time you're going to fall flat, or it's a situation that no one has the removal and you're going to get hit for like 20 as a consequence.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. There's also like other budgetary options that you could choose instead of Doubling Season. I think, what is it, like Primal Vigor?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that does it for everybody, but like Primal Vigor is a little less scary than that because people can look at it and they'll be like, oh, well, I get double things too? Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
And the biggest thing with the Primal Vigor is even if it is helping out your opponents, unless they're in a token deck, it's still going to help you more than them.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I play Doubling Season in a meme deck and they're like, oh, I'm just going to stab everything you've ever loved.
It's one of those things. If you play powerful cards, people are going to assume the deck's more powerful, and it's going to bring smoke.
Yep.
So that's the reason I think WC is a bit overrated. Jacoby, you're back on the clock, my guy.
Ironically, a combination card with your pick, Cameo Field Researcher. I feel is an extremely overrated card because the only time it's truly ever going to scare you is, oh, Doubling Season into Tameo, and then I ult, and then I have Omniscience. Any other time, oh, when this hits or this hits, I draw a card, and you just murder Tameo anyways.
It's not just Omniscience. It's also draw 3 cards, then Omniscience.
I used to have her in my Secret Lair deck for a hot minute, and then I just took it out just because it wasn't even because of a power level thing. It's just because I just wasn't having fun with her. But like people do tend to kind of go like alerts up when they see that because that's like, okay, it's Omniscience. Like that, they don't see anything else. They're like, Omniscience, okay, I know what it needs to do.
Like the automatic assumption of we're gonna have to kill it or we all die. Like right now, every time it ever hits is because of other things you have to have with it to do that.
That's fair. And granted, having a permanent that your opponents can just swing creatures at to get rid of, odds are you're not going to get to that point unless you have just a lot of proliferate or something to get up to that point. Definitely an understandable pick there. Joe, it's on to you.
Time for more controversy. I'm choosing Imperial Seal.
Imperial Seal.
The nice little 1-drop sorcery to tutor something to the top of your deck, lose 2 life.
Oh, you mean Vampiric Tutor?
No, Vampiric Tutor's instant.
Oh, okay. So we have to do this at sorcery speed and not draw the card until next turn?
It is so overrated. The fact that its price was overblown only because it was printed into a very niche set. It is sorcery speed and only goes to the top is still real rough.
I don't like tutors that put cards on top because when I need something, I need it in hand more often than not. Like I want to say like 90% of the time I need it in hand. And so like having it to the top of my library like is only a situational thing for me. Like if I'm doing like my Scry deck or if I'm doing my Elminster deck or whatever, or if you're like revealing until you hit something. But more often than not, you're using a tutor to find an answer to something, and answer to hand is better than answer on top.
Absolutely.
This is funny because your picks this far go together. Top with a tutor that puts it on top.
Okay.
If you have them together, then no worry, you can draw it.
But individually, they suck. Yes.
Yeah, individually, it's not great.
It is a pretty tame tutor, all things considered, for the $100 price tag that it demands.
It's actually sub 100 currently. It actually did go down.
Great. So round 2 so far, doubling season. Tamio Field Researcher, Imperial Seal. Chase, you are back on the clock to round us out in round 2.
I'm excited because this one is one that I think is overrated, and I feel like people will get mad at me. Jeweled Lotus, I think, is incredibly overrated. I think it's so overrated. I think it's a great card. I love it, but I think what happens is this. People see a 0 mana value, they get blinded by that. They see the word Lotus, they get blinded by that. Jeweled Lotus is only for your commander. So like it's you see, you think, oh, mana rock, 3 for your mana. No, only for your commander. And like, yeah, that's good for like an opener, but like also if you somehow manage to get a Jeweled Lotus like later in the game, that's dead mana that you can't use. Also, it's only 3 mana of one color. There are multicolored commanders. There are some commanders that are 3 color, 4 color, and like having that, it's just so overrated in my honest opinion.
So the reason that both these knuckleheads over here are cheesing
Vindicated.
is
Chase, I want you to know you validate my entire existence as a Magic
we
player
just
right
had
now.
a very, very heated debate about the legitimacy of Jeweled Lotus because I was the only person that put it on my Commander Power 9. Because in my opinion, if you have especially if you're in a situation you have like a Geshath commander or something, to be able to get a higher cost of commander out 3 turns earlier, especially because I run a lot more aggressive decks and I usually have like a little bit of higher CMC commander. So being able to get that out earlier to start getting to what I want to do is a really big tool that I like to be able to use. They both were disagree with me. So that's why they're all here. I'm salty.
But like full stop. It is the exact reasons we gave.
Full euphoria. Oh, the pick is so beautiful.
It's a good card. It's a good card. But there have been games of Commander I played where I had it in my hand and I'm like, this is a dead card. It's a dead card. Or my Commander's multicolored and I'm like, I'm missing one color. I can't do anything. Or I'm like, wow, this is a $90 card. It's just, I think people get blinded by the 0 and the Lotus and they go with it.
One more time for the people in the back.
It's not a Black Lotus, but it is. I think it is solid. It can be a little bit overrated. I'll admit that, but I mean, when it's on, it's on.
Yeah,
I think it is in that regard. It's great. But with that said, you are on the clock again because we're starting round 3.
Cool. Okay, so my next card that I think is overrated, if I'm being completely honest, I think is going to be Craterhoof Behemoth.
Yo, that's great.
I love Craterhoof Behemoth so much as a card, but like it's very expensive for what it is. I think it's still like $20 and like I think maybe around that area, and like it's just something that's expensive to others. It's not. I think anything over $5 is expensive for a Magic card. It's very expensive for what it does. Yes, it can push you over the edge, but like there are other cards in the game that can give your stuff trample and a buff that while it may not make them 10 times as dead, they are still going to be dead. That don't cost, 5 and 3 green pips or whatever. I think that's the mana value. That's a very mana intense thing where you could do like a Beastmaster Ascension or an N-Raze Forerunners, or there's just so many options for you that are less mana intensive and less expensive that still get the same deadness done.
I also think that N-Raze Forerunners is like the exact mana value of Craterhoof too.
Is it?
I think it is.
They
5,
are the
3
exact same colors.
And probably cheaper. It's probably 25 cents.
Only because it's a +3 trample.
You have
Also,
enough creatures and you're in green.
also, at the time of this exact recording via TCG Player Craterhoof, $23.98.
Ridiculous. Don't, no.
Ridiculous.
Well, and I think with that as well, something that I think should be considered with Craterhoof is that if I'm in a game and I go for lethal damage with any other kind of pump spell, no one bats an eye. If you play Craterhoof, everyone's like, it's that Craterhoof.
Exactly, because they look at Craterhoof and they're like, well, geez, I'm dead. I'm like, you would have been dead if I played this other thing. Like, you're still the same level of dead. The number's just a little smaller.
Look them dead in their eyes. Be like, tell me I don't have Overwhelming Stampede. Look me in my eyes.
Overwhelming Stampede, Beastmaster Ascension. Take your pick.
Turns out green with big creatures is good. All right, Joe.
My next pick is Pact of Negation.
I'm going to remove that from my list.
The nice blue 0-drop counterspell that says, hey, on your next upkeep, you got to pay 3/2 blue. It has been overrated for a little while now. I think I saw it was Cam formerly playing with Power who was like, this is just a silence on the turn I'm going to win in CDH. And it doesn't feel good because all it is doing is countering something. And then if you do not win right then and there, locking yourself out for a turn.
I mean, it also is really good at sacrificing yourself to make sure that someone gets their turn 1 Soul Ring countered.
I just don't understand. I don't like counter spells, so I could be very, very, uneducated on this. But like, I get like Pactification, like Force of Will, or like heavy hitters. But like, if you're gonna run a counter spell, why not just do counter spell or negate or what is it? Arcane Denial.
Because Mana
the
Drain.
cheap ones.
Because Mana Drain is the same mana value of Counterspell, but also gives me the mana of the thing you cast.
But isn't that also like a $40 something on card?
I mean, yes.
There we go. See?
So
Counterspell.
here's the answer. People don't want to pay their taxes.
Yeah, I know. And guess what? You could pay imaginary taxes, or you could pay real life $40 on 1 square taxes. And I don't have much room to say because I spent $2,400 on 1 square and it hurts. But like, that's the last I'm doing of that.
But I think with that as well, and I would love to debate you on stack removal spells at some point in time. But, with that as well, since Pact Negation has come out, we've had multiple cards in the Commander format that are free counter spells that don't have the 5 on the back end with that as well.
Or they're just 1-drops that can be very niche, but then can do a whole lot, like an offer you can't refuse.
Just run a blue elemental blast. You'll be fine.
For when you want to counter just the red things.
Yeah.
If you sit here, okay, listen, hear me out, right? Like the elemental blast, and then you run the spell that changes spell color.
There you go. Big brain play. And
Big
guess
brain
what?
play. You always make it red.
Girl math, you've gained like $36 because those are only like $2 cards.
Problem solved.
Girl math.
Girl math.
Yeah, girl math.
Girl math.
All right, Jacoby.
This is a card I have a vendetta against. Joe recognizes it fully well. Smile me, you smug turd. Expropriate.
Let me take it off my list.
Expropriate. Listen, okay? 9 mana to get either a turn or permanent per person. If you're not casting it for free, you're spending 9 mana, something that can be countered, and you are inevitably rude forever, and you're not guaranteed to win jack crap. As is a story we had where I got, and I quote, 8 turns.
Off of a copied Expropriate.
I got 8 turns, did not win until the next rotation.
But did you win?
Eventually,
Did
but
you die though?
No, the table was like, wait, it's been 8 turns and you didn't kill us? What?
they looked at me, they're like, you totally win right now. I'm like,
That game was with me, Jacob, Krim, and Jeremy.
Christ.
I would never be so mad to be alive in my entire life.
Krim was looking there at their phone. They're like, just let me know when I'm dead. I looked Krim in their face. I'm like, listen, you're not dead. They did not believe me. I go, pass turn. They're like, what?
I feel so bad because I run Expropriate in my Elminster deck, and I always try not to cast it. Very rarely do I cast it. It's an Elminster because it is a 9 mana spell that I can exile off the top to get 9 creatures.
Make them
And, like,
dragon fairies.
That's why I run it. But when I have it in my hand, or like people like look at my hand, or like the very rare occasion that I do play it, I feel like the scum of the earth. I actually feel like a villain, like a mustache twirling. I just put your favorite commander deck on like train tracks, like kind of villain.
Can't relate.
I think sometimes it is fun to be the villain at the table. But yeah, Expropriate, definitely a strong card. But I think the ramifications, because the next game, you're going to get attacked.
Yeah, people don't trust you.
You're going to get hit.
The moment you look me in my eyes, Joe, and you say, give me your stuff, I'm never going to do it.
Jacob, give me your stuff.
Never.
Yeah, I'm back on the clock here. I have a very reasonable, logical pick that I'm going to put to the side because I'm going to tick off Jacob here. I'm picking Atraxa's Praetor Voice.
Wow.
Now,
You're just out here calling me out.
my rationale here is Atraxa's Praetor Voice was a very popular Commander precon when it came out. Sold a lot of copies. A lot were out there. It's so vague in its abilities that there's been a lot of decks and ways you can go with the commander. So it's pumping up the amount of decks that are out there for like EDH Rec artificially. And it's, you're having like charge counter decks and planeswalker decks and plus counter decks decks and everything else. And we have enough proliferate stuff out there that we don't necessarily need to have a once per turn proliferate commander in the command zone. And then on top of that, oh, well, what about Attract Super Friends? Okay, so all your commanders are getting 1 loyalty counters, and then you're going to blow up your own Atraxa with your 15th board wipe that you have in the deck, because that's usually how the Attract Super Friends decks operate, where it is a solid card. But I think as far as like everyone's like, oh, it's one of the best out there, I think that is an overrated take.
And especially with the new Atraxa, that is definitely better.
New Atraxa cool, old Atraxa, I get you. That's fair.
I agree that it's overrated. I don't agree that the new one is better. I don't.
Okay.
I do think that the original is better, and there's a reason why the new Atraxa does not reflect the old Atraxa, because I did actually make a post on Twitter being like, I'm really sad that the new Atraxa doesn't do a callback to the last one, and some designers on Twitter were like, there's a reason, because holy crap, that would be really bad. And I'm like, you know what? Atraxa's been at the #1 spot. I think she still might be on EDH Rec for however many years. I'm almost certain she's top 5.
She's still currently.
We had Muldrotha take over for a little while, but I think when they came out with the Commander Anthology and they had the Secret Lair with the really pretty Atraxa art, the new Capenna, the gilded foil.
I don't think that art is pretty.
I liked it. I liked it. Art is subjective.
Yeah, and I could say that the new Atraxa is quote unquote better than the old Atraxa, only because of just the insane card draw value and me just being in CDH, seeing how many people are casting Atraxa to just keep cycling through their deck and drawing as every single card.
I also, with the opinion of Atraxa being the new one being worse, they did all my Phyrexians dirty, and I am so very upset.
And now it is time to get back to, since I'm going to start around 4 here. We had Creator Hoof, Path Negation, Expropriate, and Atraxa Praetor Voice. I can get back to my very calm, reasonable selection. I'm kidding. Jacob, my 4th pick is Avacyn, Angel's Hope. Is overrated.
I disagree so heavily.
Now we are in a design space now that one of the top commander board apps you have are going to be things like Farewell that are going to exile everything. Swords, Plowshares, Path to Exile, Cyclonic Rift. These are all able to appropriately manage the situation as far as destruction. Can you build Atraxa and have a lot of board wipes to answer in addition? Absolutely. But I think giving everything universally indestructible versus you can have a gotcha instant in your deck to be able to do that instead. And this is an 8-drop, which should be game winning, haymaker kind of stuff, where I don't think it's as good as people are trying to make it out to be. Granted, it is still a good card, but as far as an 8-drop goes, I think it's a bit overrated.
Man, you and I are coming really close on our selections here.
And I will happily hear rebuttals from all 3 of you.
I disagree, because I just finally put one in my mono white Flyers deck, and 8 mana is intense, yes. But the fact that she has Indestructible herself and the fact that she gives Indestructible still is very difficult to get rid of in Commander. Yeah, we do live in the era where we do have some exile stuff. We have Farewell and whatever. But I think, and this is just my personal opinion, I think while that card is very good, I think a lot of Commander players are hesitant to run removal like that because it gets their stuff too. And when I run board wipes, for example, when I play my decks, I typically play decks that go, okay, play a board wipe in response, I'll make my stuff indestructible to end of turn. So it's a single multi-side except for me, board wipe. I feel like people are scared to run mass exile. I think we're slowly teetering in that area in terms of design space. I still feel like because a lot of people, I think, don't like to run Farewell because there's a lot of discourse around it because it's a feels bad card. I think it's fun and I'm okay with it, but I can see why people wouldn't want to run it. And I see Swords and Path more, but I still think she's rough. She's a rough one.
I think the modern amount of removal, and we're talking just things on the board.
Yeah.
I need to have a slot in my deck to remove a creature. It's either going to be something like a Beast Within that I can hit a Planeswalker, a land, whatever I'm needing to hit, so I have versatility, or it's gonna be I want to make sure that I can deal with Indestructible, so I'm going to run something like Swords or Path to Exile, things of that. And they're making a lot more exile target creature, good thing happens for your opponent. So that's a lot more prevalent out there.
Yeah.
Or you could do what I like to do and just run blue bounce spells. You don't have it on the board because it's back in your hand.
Or you could do Teferi and put it third from the top.
Super bad. 0 out of 10 card. Garbage. See, my only take on this right now, as you look at me with scorn in your eyes, is you know how many times people forget that bitch has vigilance? She's got vigilance.
I don't remember that she has that, and I run her.
Yeah,
She's got vigilance.
flying vigilance 8/8, indestructible, and gives everything else indestructible.
She's my queen.
Yeah, I mean, but you could run a chroma at 1 less mana and then have 2 combats. You can run all the damage dealt to your opponents as double. You get halved. There's a lot of other things you can do as well, especially, and those are like, cheaper spells, like versus this is an 8-drop and it doesn't have haste. You're going to have to wait a turn. It only takes me 1 little mana to remove it. I think that, it has a place, but there is some overrated to it.
I do want to say, like, in terms of like vibes, which is totally how you critique a card or whatever. I would agree that she is overrated because, let's go to like a hallmark of like the Barbie movie when she's like, I'm stereotypical Barbie. When people think Barbie, they think me, Avacyn. Like when you think stereotypical, like really good angel, really good white card, that she's there. She's what she's always going to be. You're always going to think of her.
It kind of goes into the white strategy of outlasting. The important thing is that it's not supposed to be a haymaker. It's supposed to outlast your opponent because they cannot do anything.
Definitely knew I was going to get some controversy from that, especially from Jacoby. But hey, it's all good. You're on the clock. You can go make me mad now.
I'm not going to make you mad. We just have a lot of ties close because you did Doubling Season. I did Tameo. You did Avacyn. I'm doing Sigarda.
Okay.
Which one?
All of them.
Okay.
They're all overrated.
You're very character driven.
I enjoy lore, but I'm very character specific.
Yeah.
Just that character over there? Come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're talking like the one where all your permanents except her are hexproof?
Where all your humans are hexproof, where all of your
Okay,
stuff is,
so-
except for her, is hexproof.
Font to blessings.
Yep.
Can't be
the
sacrificed.
The new Sigarda that's like, hey, find humans and you do human stuff. All of them. They're all overrated. Every single one of them.
And why do you have this crazy take?
Because every single time I look and they're like, oh my gosh, Sigarda's on the field. How are we going to deal? And I go, 4 mana. I would like to blow up the board, destroy the world. And they just go, yeah, I got no answer to that. And they scoop it all up anyways because they thought their single target removal protection meant diddly dick to me. Wrath of God. God said no.
Unless there's an Avacyn, I guess. Or all the other protection white spells that you can be running.
You get Teferi's protection, sure, but that's not Sigarda.
Yes,
Sigarda.
the Achromas will.
It's weird because like I disagree, but I don't like have any like basis upon it. I'm like,
But no, my Sigarda.
no, not even that. I'm like, I think they're all pretty fine. Yeah. They are one of the cards of Magic. That's
They
what my
are
brain
one
is.
of the cards.
They're one of the cards.
But like the reason I think it's overrated is there's only certain decks that run it, and it's very specific. Either a Legends Matters deck or I'm using this to protect all my stuff, and it doesn't actually do it against a board wipe.
I do run a Joda deck that I want to have as many instances of like your stuff has hexproof to keep my commanders safe from spot removal. So I do appreciate having those and also having the flying. So I really do like having Sigarda and then Shalai and those kind of like 4 mana angel equivalents.
See, at least with that take from me, I wouldn't say that it is overrated. I also wouldn't say it's underrated. I would just say it's rated because I've never seen anyone play Sigarda and I just go, well, my game's done.
Very whelmed.
Yeah.
It is one of the many Magic cards is where my brain goes.
Fair enough. I recently played against someone who was like, oh my god, I made this Sigarda deck and it's so cool and blah blah, and then I just kept board wiping them and they were like, oh no, I'm so sad.
I've done that before where I've like built a deck and I'm like, I like misread one thing. Like shout out to back in the day when I built a Kakusho deck before they did that Commander Graveyard rule change. And when I found out and I was like, okay, cool, I get him back. They're like, no, you don't. And I was like, I guess I'm ripping this apart.
This was Levi with Obeka.
Yeah.
And that's when Elenda shot up too. Elenda the Dusk Rose. That once that rule changed, shot up.
Well, that was still a fun deck. Elenda, in regardless, people were building that and finding ways to get her back, and it was a really neat design. But Joe, you're on the clock.
So I'm going to do something very near and dear to my heart. Time Twister.
Okay.
I love time twister effects. I love doing that in like my group hug deck. I love doing those in CDH. The issue is every time you're also doing this for your opponents, and doing it for your opponents is not always going to be to your benefit if you do want to win.
Are you talking about time twister effects or just time twister?
I wanted to go with just time twister, but now I kind of want to expand that to time twister effects.
Cool, because I was about to say, like, I have never in my 8 years of Magic have ever experienced a time twister.
Yeah, for the most part, I have played a lot of Echo of Eons, Commit to Memory.
I do Echo of Eons. I do that.
Time Reversal. Oh, and Days Undoing. Yeah, no, Days Undoing has been real funny and fun story. I actually countered somebody's spell by doing a Days Undoing and making somebody else end their turn.
That is so weird.
Welcome to Magic with
Like-
Joe.
I think that's a fair take because there's one friend we have that's ever done a bunch of time twister like effects, and he doesn't really show up anymore. Is Brian?
But that's mainly because he mainly did just Wheels deck in general.
He's like Wheels. And I mean, granted, he's in college now and doing school stuff. So he's a
He's
little
doing
bit
his
busier.
own thing. He's making the good family proud. Don't get me wrong, but it is overrated. I'll give it to you.
Look, I love those effects, and especially Commit to Memory and Echo of Eons. They certainly help go anti-mill because I've been milled one too many times. they one time copied Dreamborn Muse 6 times.
Love you, Joe.
After that, I put that into the deck and never looked back.
Love you, Joe.
I love an Echo of Eons. I have that in my Locust God deck. I love it in there. It's good.
Coming to a close here. The first and last pick reports in the snake draft are belonging to Chase. So what is the final pick in the overrated cards draft?
I'm so excited because I did not write this originally on my list. I just thought of it now while we were talking. Eminence Commanders.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
I think Eminence Commanders are extremely, extremely, extremely overrated. They are like, they're autopilot decks, and I just, personally, I find them to be rather boring. They just do the thing and they do it well. And in my opinion, I think Eminence goes against the spirit. And by the spirit, I mean like the very nature of Commander, which is you have a legendary creature and you cast that, and that is your leader. To have a commander never leave the command zone ever, because it's better in the command zone, it just feels very counterproductive to what the format does in general. Like, there have been games I've played where like I just, never need to play my commander because like maybe, I didn't have enough mana, or I like lucked into a way to win via someone else's board state or whatever. But like Eminence, in my opinion, is my least favorite mechanic of all time, and I think it's incredibly overrated.
All right. So when you say the creature's better in the command zone, the three, because so we've had, I think, 5 total so far with Eminence. So the main 3 that I'm thinking of here is we're talking Soren Markov in like the more
Edgar.
or Edgar Markov
Yeah.
in the more competitive versions. What's
The one
Inala?
that we continue to talk about, Dragon.
See, I don't think I think you want to get Dragon out. I was thinking more Aloro and then
Even then. And Loro has a weird Eminence.
Yeah.
It was Eminence before Eminence
Yeah.
was cool.
so it was the original Eminence, and then you also have the wizard making the clones. You do the combo thing.
Inala.
But Inala, yes. And then, so are you including Dragon in that? Because Dragon getting cast is very powerful.
I would like to say that it is just as powerful in the command zone. And the reason why I say that, because I just looked up the Dragon itself, is because it still does what it does in the command zone. Because Eminence says on the Dragon, as long as the Dragon is in the command zone or on the battlefield, other dragon spells you control cost 1 less to cast. And his ability is just whenever 1 or more dragons you control attack. It doesn't even have to be whatever. So like, why would you like waste the mana on a very mana intensive commander to get him out when you can use that mana to play other spells in your deck that are going to be synergistic with your commander by already staying in the command zone? Like Edgar Markov, for example, he makes tokens. So like you make bodies just by playing other bodies. So you don't really need him out. So why would you waste 6 mana to get him out when you could just play like 3 small vampires, which is what you want to do in that deck, and then you poop out 3 other small vampires and you just get an insane board.
Yeah, and especially with the talk about how Edgar Markov was in talks of getting a ban from like a whole bunch of people in the community because it was just that good. I think he is banned in Duel Commander.
In French,
the
yeah.
Yeah, the 1v1.
And on that same token, Arabo. Oh, baby, Arabo.
Yep, Arabo is another really powerful one. The newest one, which came out in, I think that was like
March of the Machine.
March of the Machine.
Oh, the Knights. Yeah.
I did a podcast episode before that was previewed and I said Eminence was a mistake. I think Eminence is horrible. I hope we never see it again. I think it is just, I listed every single reason why. And then the new one was printed, which is Sidar Jabari of Zalfir, which is Esper colors, but it is kind of like sort of fixed Eminence. It's way underwhelming compared to the powerhouses of like Dragon and Arabo and Edgar, because it says whenever you attack with one or more knights, if he is in the command zone or on the battlefield, you draw a card, then discard a card. That is minimal compared to the other lads.
So I would like to see more Eminence, but I don't want to see good Eminence. I don't want to see this crappy, really bad Eminence either. I want something that's not super powerful, but incentivizes you to play it in addition to having something cool in the zone.
I can't.
Well, see, and that's the biggest thing is that a lot of the Eminence did have tacked on things to make you incentivized to cast it, but
They
even
just
then,
don't care.
it's still there in the
don't-
command zone.
Yes, you're still getting value, so why cast it when you're getting
I
value?
think if the value is very minimal and it gives you, like, for example, the discard and draw guy was super, super bad and his tacked on ability did not help. But if it had maybe some other, like, I think if we added more claws to Eminence, it'd be interesting.
But that requires like this whole retroactive thing that I just don't think they would want to do with Eminence.
You know,
Yeah.
totally.
I think they already learned their mistake with Companion.
Yeah, Eminence as a mechanic, 100%. I will not disagree, is a mistake. I always found it interesting. I think it's too strong still.
That is the draft. Chase, you ended up with all the dual lands, Jeweled Lotus, Craterhoof Behemoth, and the Eminence Commanders. Joe, your roster here was Sensei's Divining Top, Imperial Seal, Pact of Negation, and Time Twister / Wheels. Jacoby, you had all the Teferis, Tamio Field Researcher, Expropriate, and all the Sigardas. And then I had Chromox, Doubling Season, Atraxa, and Avacyn Angel of Hope. A lot of different options here. I think, some interesting debates were had, which is always fun. I just want to say, thank you so much for joining us on the show here today, Chase. And anyone else have any other final comments before we go?
It was wonderful having you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, you're still wrong about the Teferi thing.
No.
All right, that is all the time we have for this week. Thank you so much for tuning into the Thought Vessel, and thank you for coming in. You have a good rest of your day.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.